Hi, I'm Mary from Mountaintop Education Consulting, and this is my friend Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler from Enaltecer Education Consulting.
And one of the questions we've been getting recently is how do we welcome students mid-year, especially English language learner students? And it seems to be happening more and more often in all different school districts, right? So some larger school districts are used to getting new students mid-year, but some smaller school districts just aren't used to it. So Tyler, what's one thing that you would say about these students who are arriving mid-year?
So, one of the things that I think is really important that I know that you always like to bring up is what it feels like, first of all, as a new student or a new person in a new place as a human, regardless of whether you're in a school system or you're traveling, or I even just thought about what it was like entering college
Yeah.
as a freshman and how that was something that was so new and different and scary.
Right. So even as adults, we have this anxiety of going into somewhere new and what are the routines and am I going to mess up and look silly doing something right in this sphere? And even more so in students coming in, because depending on the grade level, the emotions are really high. There's a lot of social emotional components to it as well. Um,
Absolutely.
so making sure that we put ourselves in that position first to think about it. And then what is it like for an American student coming into a new American school, right? So we want to make
Right.
sure that we welcome them in a certain way, and there's standard pieces that you have in place for that. And then we have to start thinking about, in addition to that, what do we do for L's? And then what do we do for newcomers who haven't been in an American school system?
Absolutely. And I think one thing to kind of shape our thinking around this is what are we doing for all of our students in the beginning of the school year, right? Because regardless of whether they're a newcomer or a multilingual learner or a native English speaking student who's been in the United States their whole life, they're new to your classroom. They're new to your routines. They're new to everything with you. I know that a lot of teachers will do kind of a reset after any kind of break and holiday. So I think that this time of year specifically might be a good time to start thinking about that. If you're
So let
if
me
you're
just say, this time of year for us right now is New Year's.
Oh, thank you.
No matter when you're watching this, this could apply, but especially at New Year's, because we have a lot of new L's, multilingual learners who are arriving because of the different timing of school systems.
Yes. So instead of just diving right back in and starting business as usual, you may want to consider what are the kinds of things that all your students need to be reminded of, but then also what are some of those things that a new student from another country who doesn't have the ability in English yet, what kind of things might they need? So we have a few ideas that we want to share with you that we think will kind of make the transition for the students and for you as a teacher a little easier than it might otherwise be.
Yeah, so I think there's different ways to look at it. First, you want to see how, like Tyler said, how do you welcome any students? You want to have something prepared ahead of time, right? Because you don't want to have that chaos in the moment that they're brought to your classroom. Sometimes we don't know that they're coming and they're just walked in and here's your new student for the day. And your face may be like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this right now. And the student might see that. So the first thought is the first time you see the student, it is a smile and a welcome. No matter what state you are in at the moment, they're welcome and they belong in your classroom and make them feel that. But one of the ways you can feel prepared for it is to have a welcome pack or some sort of welcome kit for any student who arrives with things like their layout of the school or your class rules and expectations, maybe some of the previous work assignments that you've done.
Maybe a daily schedule, a vacation schedule, the school calendar, the school schedule, any of those kinds of important procedures, arrival and dismissal procedures. Some of those important things that you might not think about at different parts of the points of the year because you've already gone over that and have those things well established. from the beginning of your school year, right? We don't typically have to talk to students about the routine for getting on and off the bus in April, unless there's an incident and something needs to be addressed. But those kinds of things that we talk about in the beginning of the school year, those are now the things that your new students will need to know. And we never want to see a student being reprimanded or getting in trouble for something that they did not know was a rule or an expectation. And we don't even mean just in your classroom. That could mean on the bus, in the hallway, in the cafeteria, things like that.
So I think it's really important that this isn't done in silo as well, right? So when we talk about having things like the calendar and different school pieces of school information ready, you want to know what the student and the family are already receiving, so you don't have to replicate everything. But if the school office or central office is not giving out some of these things that we know students need to feel welcome and prepared, and families as well, then it does fall on us in the classroom, because we're the ones who see the students every day.
Absolutely. And then I think there's the other part of your welcome packet, having some materials on hand, because most of us in our experience in the classroom, we have run out of materials. We've had new students coming in and we don't have a desk or a chair, but then we also don't have pencils, crayons, notebooks, whatever the materials are that the students use throughout the day, making sure that you have some of those set aside so that when they do arrive, you're not flailing. Right. And
Yeah.
so the next thing that that we want to suggest would be to have already identified some kind of student buddy, or I like to call them ambassadors because it sounds a little fancier and more official, but having some designated students who might serve as your welcoming committee for the classroom, which means that you would have had to prepare them with the expectations of what their role looks like. But so that you don't have to be the only one orienting that student to the new school, the new language, the new everything. It's just important that we understand that the student's job as a buddy is not to be their teacher. It's to be a buddy. It's to help them get through the day and maybe answer some questions. If they can speak the same language as the students that are coming in, that's even better, to help have some of those conversations. But
If they can't, though, kids are pretty resilient at
they
figuring out how to
really are.
communicate.
They really are. And without fail, even if you're in a place where the majority of your students come in speaking Spanish or Portuguese, you will get a student from another part of the world who is the only student in the building that speaks that language. But yes, absolutely, kids are resilient and they figure out ways to make other students feel comfortable. So that's something that you want to think about when you're identifying those students that you want to have in that role.
And this might look different at different levels, right? So in the elementary school, you have one teacher typically for the majority of your day. And then off to specialists and those, we want to make sure they're included. But in middle school, you want to coordinate a bit with your content teachers, your different generalists, right? So that you have maybe one ambassador, so they don't have, you're all trying to plan this on your own. Have a grade level system set up. So there's a grade level packet of general things for the students that they need to know. So again, for that part, like, you're not on your own. Work with people. In high school, it's going to look even different because kids have all different schedules and teachers, and it's a bit more complicated. But it can be done, and it should be done, just looking a bit different.
And again, that might be something that is done in coordination with the guidance department.
Yeah.
Because those are usually the ones that set up the schedules. So having these kinds of conversations at some point with them. Now we understand that if it's January and you're going back to school this coming week and you have a student arrive, obviously you can't go and have this conversation with your guidance department about, hey, let's put this into place. But that doesn't mean that the conversation can't still happen, and consider some of the things that would be helpful for those students who have already arrived later than the beginning of the year, or who inevitably are going to continue to arrive from now until the end of the school year.
Yeah, I would reiterate that. There's no expectation that like all of this is done if you haven't done it before, right? Take a few ideas and implement it, and you're gonna see what needs to be added, right? So for every situation, it's a bit specific, right? So you'll kind of see, oh, I should have taught that before, and oh, I should have really explained this a little better, or oh, the kids didn't quite know how to go through the lunch line and give their number instead of paying. So think of where you want that ambassador, speaking of lunch, where you want them to give a tour, perhaps, right? So lunch lines are super intimidating for kids who aren't used to our system, and where to sit at lunch, what to do at recess. So having even those things that aren't academic, those things, and I would even say having those things thought out first, because if you don't have the student feeling comfortable and welcome, right, their affective filter is going to be so high that they're not going to be taking in any information. You know,
Yeah,
they're still on that fight or flight mode until we can get them feeling comfortable.
absolutely. Which kind of goes into a little bit of the idea of maintaining similar routines and procedures always. So again, this, if it's not something that you already do, maybe consider what routines and procedures you already have that are the same all the time, because I'm sure that everybody does. But then think about those different transitions during the day, the expectations, even simple things, right? Like, where does work get turned in? Where are students getting their materials and supplies from in the classroom? If you don't have the ability right now to restructure the way that your independent work time or your transition from, you know, time A to time B in the classroom, if you don't have the ability right now to change that, start taking those bite-sized steps to make some of those changes, because then your students will be familiar with what they're supposed to do, even if the content is constantly changing.
Yeah, and I think the assumption of best intent is always important, especially for students new to the country, right? So I've had students who just middle of a lesson get up and walk out of the room to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, what are you doing? You didn't raise your hand, you didn't ask, you didn't sign out. And they're not being disrespectful. It's just that's what they've known in the past. So, and you know, if you react like reprimand them, they go back into their shell often. So just thinking like, oh, why did they do that? Did I not explain it well? Did they not understand? Maybe I did explain it. And this is a great place to think about visuals as well. If you have a true newcomer new to the country and beginning level of English language proficiency, no matter how many times or how loud you say something, they're not necessarily going to understand, but they do understand the visuals to help them through systems. So that's another thing you can think of as you give them the routines, have something to show them what to do as well. And one other thing
And
that
then
popped into mind that we hadn't talked about before, but was names, right? So first of all, pronouncing their name correctly is huge because your name is your identity. And even if it takes you quite a few times to get it right, if you're trying, that counts for so much. But also helping them know the names of the other students in the classroom. So at the beginning of the year, sometimes we have the name tents on our desks or whatever you might use. But make sure that there's something so that they start to know each other's names. Whether it's you using names, requiring them to use each other's names as they speak with each other, a list of student names for the new student. I know living in different countries, for me, trying to remember people's names and the names weren't familiar to me in general, it was really hard. So for middle and older students, really just having a list of the kids' names is huge.
Yeah, and I know even those of us that have had the best intentions, those are sometimes things that we forget because there's so many things that we have to remember. But I know that we've all had students that have arrived later on, and then at some point, weeks or months after they've been there, they're still referring to another student as that girl. That girl over there. Okay, that girl has a name. What is her name? But we forget, that we've already done this stuff. And also, like Mary said, if it's a name that is not familiar to them in their language, like me, my name is Tyler. What other language do you find the name Tyler? Actually, I've met one Brazilian student that had the name Tyler spelled differently. But my point is, there are different names. Some of our students have names that are difficult for us to pronounce or unfamiliar, but also it goes the other way, right? For them, there may be some names that are really hard to remember because they've never heard it before. So those are some of the, it doesn't have to be a whole name game every time someone new comes in, but if students are wearing IDs, making sure that they're displayed, or like you said, Mary, those name tents can be really good. If there's something that you do for substitutes to remind them of what your students' names are, maybe that's something that you could use as, leverage some of the things that you've already done. Because the whole idea here is work smarter, not harder.
Yes.
Right? Once you have some of these things in place, it will make everything a lot smoother. And it does take a lot of work up front. But once a lot of these strategies and procedures and routines become normal and a familiar habit, you'll notice a change in the ease of the transition of those new students and the ease for yourself as the teacher and the other students in the class, right?
Right.
So I think that also having conversations with the rest of the class about what happens when new students come is also important. The
Yeah. Community being welcoming, making sure they're seen and taken care of.
Absolutely.
So we've dropped quite a few things in a short time. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Tyler, for now?
For now, no, I think that's enough. We'll continue with some more some more nuggets.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. If you have questions about this, if this is happening to you and you want to dig into some of this, please reach out to either of us. Our information will be below for getting in contact. But this is one of our passions, I would say, really working with newcomers and English language learners in general, just making them feel welcome, making them feel seen, and really helping them go forward academically, right? Once we get this part down, then we can work on academic language and their academics. So thank you for joining us, and
Thank you so
we hope to
much.
see you on our next one.